You're standing in your kitchen. It's 11 p.m. You're exhausted. And for some reason, you're staring at a cracked coffee mug sitting on the counter that you've owned for 7 years, and you feel genuinely guilty about throwing it away. Not sad, not sentimental in a thoughtful way. Guilty, like the mug will know. And here's the thing. That feeling isn't weird. It's not a quirk. It's not a personality flaw. That feeling is one of the most well-documented responses in all of human psychology, and it points to something genuinely strange about the relationship between people and the stuff they own. Here's the wild part. Objects are already talking. They've been talking this whole time. You just didn't know what language to listen for. Through forensics, archaeology, psychology, and molecular analysis, science has gotten very, very good at reading what they're saying. Every object you've ever touched has a story that scientists can already partially read. So if objects could actually talk, not in a children's movie way, not metaphorically, but in a real, verifiable, scientifically documented way, what would they say? The answer is way stranger than you think. And once you understand it, you will never look at a cracked mug, a worn shoe, or a dead phone the same way again. Here's what most people picture when they hear, "if objects could talk." Something sentimental, a fantasy, a metaphor, something for greeting cards or Pixar movies where the lamps have feelings. But that's not what this is. This isn't about imagining objects as little characters with tiny opinions. This is about the fact that objects are already speaking right now, in a language that scientists have spent decades figuring out how to read. And what they're saying is sometimes beautiful, sometimes very uncomfortable, and occasionally world-altering. Before we get into what they'd say, we need to figure out why your brain already thinks they're talking. Because you do. You swear at your car. You name your houseplants. You apologize to a chair you walked into. Don't even try to deny it. There's a real scientific reason for this, and it starts with an experiment from 1944 that involved nothing but triangles. In 1944, psychologists Fritz Heider and Marianne Simmel showed people a short film. The film contained 2 triangles and a circle moving around a rectangle. That's it. No faces, no voices, no characters, just shapes doing shape things on a screen. But here's what happened. People watched these shapes and immediately started describing them like they were people. A big triangle was being aggressive. A small triangle was scared. The circle was trying to escape. People narrated conflict, motivation, fear, and yes, romance, from abstract geometric shapes moving around a box. This became one of the most cited experiments in social cognition ever conducted because it revealed something fundamental about your brain. It doesn't wait for something to prove it's alive before it starts treating it like it is. We assign intention to anything that moves, anything that seems to respond, anything that's just part of our experience. Nicholas Epley, Adam Waits, and John Cacioppo built on this in their 2007 paper in Psychological Review, arguing that anthropomorphism, projecting human qualities onto non-human things, comes from 3 drives. We use human-like knowledge to explain unfamiliar behavior. We want to predict unpredictable things. And we're wired to seek social connection even when there's no actual person there, which is why you apologize to the chair. Your brain ran out of obvious explanations for why the chair hurt you, briefly assigned it intention, and your social instincts fired automatically. You said, "sorry" to furniture. Your brain was trying to be polite, so we give objects a voice. We've been doing it since before we had language. And that's not a bug in human psychology. That's actually really important context for what science has discovered about what objects genuinely carry. Because it turns out the objects didn't need our help to be interesting. Their actual stories are already extraordinary, starting with the objects that have outlasted every single person who touched them by several thousand years. In 1986, anthropologist Igor Kopytov published an essay called The Cultural Biography of Things, and the idea is exactly what it sounds like. Kopytov argued that objects should be studied the same way you'd study a person's life, by following them through time. Who made them? Who owned them? Who valued them? Who abandoned them? What they were worth at different points, to different people. He called it the social life of objects, because an object doesn't just exist. It doesn't sit there being inert. It has a career. Think about a wedding ring. To the jeweler, it was raw material and labor. To the person who bought it, It was a financial decision and a symbol. To the person who received it, it became the most personally significant object they own. And if that person passes away and the ring ends up in a drawer for 30 years and then at an estate sale, it becomes something else entirely. A curiosity, maybe a bargain, to a complete stranger. Same piece of metal, completely different lives. Or think about a soldier's helmet, manufactured in a factory somewhere, issued to a person with a name and a family, worn through experiences that, honestly, no object should have to witness. Brought home, kept in a box in the attic. Discovered decades later by grandchildren who have no idea what their grandfather was looking at while wearing it. That helmet would have a lot to say. Not because it's magic, because it's a record. And here's where it gets even more interesting, because the best objects, the ones that speak the loudest, are often the ones that broke. In 2001, cultural theorist Bill Brown published an essay called Thing Theory. And the central idea is one of those thoughts that sounds simple until you actually sit with it. Brown argued that we don't pay attention to objects most of the time. A window is invisible until it's dirty. A car is invisible until it doesn't start. A tool is invisible until it breaks. The moment something fails, it stops being background and becomes a thing. Something with its own presence, its own history, its own inconvenient insistence on being noticed. A cracked mug is more than an uncracked mug, psychologically, because the crack is evidence. Something happened here. There's a story in this damage, and forensic science takes that idea and runs with it to genuinely wild places. In forensics, there's a principle called Locard's exchange principle. The short version: every contact leaves a trace. A 2021 forensic review confirmed the core of this. Whenever two objects come into contact, or a person and an object come into contact, there's always some kind of exchange. Hair, fibers, soil, paint, skin cells, glass, DNA, always. Which means a jacket can carry fibers from someone else's jacket from a place it shouldn't have been. A shoe can carry soil that places it at a scene. A cup can carry DNA from everyone who ever picked it up. A broken object can carry the exact shape of the force that broke it, and a forensic analyst can reconstruct the event from the fracture pattern alone. Objects don't just sit there. They collect. They accumulate. They remember everything they've touched, written down in the language of chemistry and physics. They are, in a completely literal and non-metaphorical sense, witnesses. Every object you own is a witness to your life. But forensics is just listening to recent history. What if you want to go back further? Like thousands of years further? Like, this guy died before the Roman Empire existed further? That's where archaeology gets involved. And this is the part that might genuinely rewire what you think old stuff means. Archaeologists have a technique called use-wear analysis, which involves studying microscopic damage on ancient tools under magnification to figure out exactly what those tools were used for. The scratches, the polish, the wear patterns, they're all different depending on whether you cut meat, scraped hide, shaped wood, or worked bone. A 2021 paper on quantitative use-wear analysis confirmed that microwear polish can identify the specific material a tool worked on with enough precision to tell the difference between wood, antler, hide, and bone. Which brings us to Ötzi. If you don't know Ötzi, he's the Copper Age glacier mummy discovered in 1991 in the Alps. He was frozen in the mountains for approximately 5,000 years, and when scientists found him, his objects were preserved with him. His clothing, his copper axe, his bow, his arrows, his fire-starting kit, his stone tools. And those tools, it turns out, have a lot to say. A 2018 study in PLOS-1 analyzed the wear traces on Ötzi's stone tools and found that he was right-handed, that he had medium to good skill in maintaining his toolkit, and that he'd actively resharpened his tools before he died, medium to good, which means that 5,000 years later, archaeologists basically graded this man's homework. He got a B, competent, functional, solidly fine, for someone who died in the Alps without a map or a phone charger. His weapons were unfinished, which might suggest urgency, like he was moving fast and didn't have time to complete his prep. His repair materials show he was resourceful and practical. His toolkit tells the story of a man still actively managing survival in the final days of his life. This is someone who died 5,000 years ago. We don't have his name. We don't have a single word he said to anyone. But his objects kept talking after he couldn't. And that's not a figure of speech, that's just science. And if you think the pots are staying quiet while all of this is happening, you've severely underestimated pottery. Archaeologists use something called organic residue analysis, extracting and identifying traces of fats, oils, resins, and waxes preserved inside ancient ceramic vessels. A 2022 review on lipids in archaeological pottery confirmed that organic residues are commonly found inside these containers and can reveal exactly what was cooked, stored, or carried in them thousands of years ago. Which means a pot can tell you, I held milk, I cooked meat, I stored oil, I was used every single day. That pot wasn't sitting on a shelf for special occasions. It was Tuesday night dinner. It was whatever was left in the pantry. It was completely, magnificently unglamorous. And historians care about that, because the grand objects of history, the thrones, the temples, the crowns, already get to speak. We preserve them, study them, write books about them. But the pots and the tools and the worn-out everyday things are the ones that tell you how people actually lived. What they ate, what they made, what mattered enough to do repeatedly. And then DNA science pushed even further. A 2017 review on ancient DNA confirmed that biological material has been successfully extracted from artifact-associated materials, including plant remains, wood, and keratinous materials, things like hair and fingernails. A comb can preserve hair. A pipe can preserve saliva. A textile can preserve skin cells, dye compounds, and traces of parasites. These are biological time capsules made out of the most ordinary objects you can imagine. A comb. A comb can now tell scientists who you were, where you'd been, and what was living on you. Which is honestly more personal information than most people share on a first date. Now here's the uncomfortable part I promised you earlier, because all of that is ancient history. What about your stuff? Take your phone. It looks clean. It looks like a sleek, flat rectangle with no visible history whatsoever. But the Royal Society of Chemistry notes that mobile devices contain conflict elements, including tin, gold, tungsten, and tantalum, as well as rarer elements like indium. The Natural History Museum adds copper, tellurium, lithium, cobalt, manganese, and more. The U.S. Geological Survey has confirmed that more than half of a mobile device's components are made from mined and semi-processed materials that came out of the ground somewhere on this planet. If your phone could talk about where it came from, it would not be a clean story. It would be mines and factories and shipping containers and supply chains and labor-spanning countries you've never visited and resources extracted from the earth itself. Your phone has been everywhere. It just looks brand new. Kopitov's biography of objects framework applies perfectly here. Your phone has a career. It started as minerals in the ground. It passed through processing, manufacturing, a warehouse, a store, and then into your hand. At some point, it'll move again. Recycled, discarded, disassembled, or landfilled. It's currently somewhere in the middle of a very long journey, and it's doing a pretty convincing impression of being new. Now here's where it gets strange and modern and genuinely uncomfortable, because some objects aren't just carrying history anymore. They're reporting it, live. IBM defines the Internet of Things as a network of physical devices embedded with sensors, software, and network connectivity that collect and share data. Your thermostat knows when the temperature in the room changed, and when. Your car knows how hard you brake, what routes you take, how fast you accelerate. Your watch knows your resting heart rate, your sleep patterns, your step count. Your phone knows everywhere it has been. Not approximately everywhere. Everywhere. A 2017 study found that encrypted smart home device traffic could still reveal sensitive user behavior through traffic patterns alone, without even accessing the content. Researchers could identify when someone was sleeping, moving through a home, or talking to a device just from the shape of the data. Your smart speaker isn't just answering your questions, it's taking notes. It has built a fairly detailed portrait of your habits, your schedule, and, because the data doesn't lie, your 1 a.m. cereal situation. A 2018 study of 1,731 American adults found that attitudes toward smart home privacy depended heavily on what data was shared, with whom, and for what purpose. The concern people felt tracked almost exactly with how personally revealing the data was, so here's the shift. Ötzi's copper axe told scientists things about him 5,000 years after he died. Your devices are telling data brokers things about you right now. The objects got faster. The stakes got different. And the question isn't whether your objects are talking. it's who's listening. But here's possibly the strangest piece of all of this. The objects in your life aren't just recording your history. Some of them are actually part of how you think. In 1998, philosophers Andy Clark and David Chalmers published The Extended Mind, the argument that cognition doesn't stop at the edge of your skull. A notebook isn't just storage. It's an extension of your memory system. A calculator isn't just a tool. It's part of the process of thinking mathematically. A map isn't just a reference. It becomes part of how you navigate the world spatially. Philosopher and archaeologist Lambros Malafouris built on this with material engagement theory, folding the whole material world, artifacts, tools, signs, objects, into the cognitive equation. The idea being that your mind and your stuff are not separate systems. They're tangled together. Your phone navigates for you. Your calendar structures your future. A photograph doesn't just trigger a memory. It shapes how you remember an event, sometimes permanently. A religious object regulates your emotional state in ways you might not even consciously notice. A tool shapes the way your hand and brain learn to solve problems together over time through repetition. Objects are not just things you use. Some of them are part of the architecture of how your mind works, which is why losing your phone feels completely different from losing your umbrella. The umbrella was a tool. The phone was partly you. And Daniel Kahneman, Jack Knetsch, and Richard Thaler demonstrated something related in 1990 with research on the endowment effect. People consistently value objects more once they own them. Willingness to accept money for something you already own always exceeds willingness to pay for that same object before you own it. Ownership changes the object's value in your perception, not its actual properties. The mug becomes your mug. The cracked one you can't bring yourself to throw away. Psychologist D.W. Winnicott introduced the idea of the transitional object, a child's blanket or stuffed animal that helps regulate the move between dependence and independence. But that attachment mechanism doesn't stay in childhood. It runs quietly through adult life. A father's watch, an old-school ID from a version of yourself you barely recognize, a gift from someone who's gone and won't give you anything else. We don't keep those things because they're useful. We keep them because they hold a version of us that doesn't exist anywhere else. Here's what science can and can't do with all of this. It can read wear patterns. It can extract residue. It can pull DNA from a comb. It can track your location history and reconstruct your daily rhythms from traffic data. It's gotten extraordinarily good at the material record, but it still can't read what Ötzi was thinking when he resharpened those tools the day before he died. It can't recover the relationship between the person and the hair in the comb, the argument that happened the morning it snagged, the mundane Tuesday when it didn't. It can track your phone everywhere, but that data still doesn't capture what it meant to be in those places, at those moments, in that life. Testimony is never the whole story. Objects can witness, they can't explain. Go back to the kitchen. 11 p.m. Cracked mug on the counter. You know now that the crack isn't nothing. It's evidence of an event, a contact, a force. Locard's principle. Every contact leaves a trace. That mug has a biography that started somewhere as raw clay and ended up in your hand, in your routine, soaked in the chemical record of your coffee and your fingerprints and your mornings. It carried your lips to it for 7 years. It has your history in it in a completely literal, non-poetic, scientifically valid way. And then it cracked. And Bill Brown would tell you that's exactly when it became visible. That's when it stopped being invisible background and became something. That crack forced it into your attention. That crack made you look at it like it was a person. Your brain, the same brain that watched triangles moving around a rectangle in 1944 and saw drama, conflict, fear, and romance, looked at a cracked piece of ceramic and felt something. Because that's what human cognition does. It looks for intention. It looks for relationship. It looks for story. And the strange thing is the mug actually has one. It's written in chemistry and wear and contact and time, in a language you're only now starting to learn to read. So maybe you throw it away. Maybe you don't. Either way, what you felt standing there at 11 p.m. wasn't just guilt. It was your brain doing something it's been doing for as long as there have been brains, recognizing that this thing, this object, this piece of your life had a story, and the mug earned it.